Carson's first day at High started with the kind of nervousness only a newcomer can feel. The small Ohio town smelled of wet asphalt and freshly cut grass, and everything, from the creaky lockers to the fluorescent lights in the gym, seemed unfamiliar. Her family had moved from Texas, a decision driven by her father's new job, and carried with her the quiet determination of someone who had always relied on herself. She wasn't trying to fit in. She was trying to survive, to keep her passion alive, and to find a place in a world that seemed set on dismissing her before she could prove anything. The gym smelled faintly of sweat and liniment, a combination that made her stomach twist with nervous anticipation. High's boxing team had a reputation, one that preceded before she even laced up her gloves. The boys on the team were cocky, brash, and unapologetically confident. They had been reigning kings of the gym for years, their hierarchy cemented through years of punches, wins, and relentless training. And now, small and quiet in comparison, was stepping into their territory. "Who's the new girl?" Jake Dawson asked loudly, his voice carrying across the gym like a challenge. He was broad-shouldered, taller than most, with a cocky smirk that suggested he had never lost a fight he didn't intend to. Behind him, the other seniors chuckled, nudging one another and whispering. Didn't answer. She ignored the laughter, focusing instead on her gloves. She pulled them around her wrists, feeling the familiar comfort of leather and padding. Her mother had trained her for years, and every motion, every twist, every punch came from memory. It was muscle memory, instinct, and something deeper, pride, determination, and love all mixed into one. She could feel it thrumming through her veins, steadying her nerves. Coach Miller, a tall man with a weathered face and a voice that demanded respect without shouting, observed her silently. He had seen countless new recruits, most of whom faltered under the team's pressure. But there was something about her posture, the way she tightened her gloves, the calm before the storm in her eyes that told him she was different. "She's got fire," he muttered under his breath. "Let's see if it burns in the ring." The warm-up began. Shadow boxed with careful precision, every jab and hook measured, every foot movement deliberate. Her classmates started noticing her rhythm, the way she moved as if she had been doing this her whole life. They whispered among themselves, some mocking, some curious. Jake rolled his eyes and snorted. "Yeah, she's cute," he said to no one in particular. "But boxing, that's a man's game." Didn't flinch. She had heard things like this before, dismissive comments, mocking laughter, challenges meant to shake her confidence. She had faced worse in Texas, when her mother's passing had left her struggling to find her footing, both in life and in the ring. She knew the difference between words and action. Words could sting, but action, the kind that landed in real time in a ring with fists colliding, was what truly mattered. The first real sparring session began. Was paired with a junior, a boy half her size, and she moved with ease. Every punch she threw was measured, every block precise. The boy hesitated under her gaze, unsure how to respond. Whispers spread through the gym. "She's good, too good." But then, as if on cue, Jake Dawson stepped forward. He was larger, stronger, and brimming with arrogance. "You ready for this, newbie?" he sneered, rolling his shoulders. The gym quieted, sensing the tension. This was no ordinary sparring session. It was a challenge, a test of dominance. His eyes met his. She didn't smile, didn't flinch, she just nodded. "I'm ready," she said softly, her voice steady. Coach Miller hesitated, concern crossing his face. "Jake," he said cautiously, "don't go overboard." Jake laughed loud and brash, brushing off the warning. "Relax, coach. I'll go easy, well, maybe a little." He circled like a predator, sizing her up. The bell rang. Jake lunged first, a hard swing aimed at testing her reflexes. Ducked, sidestepping effortlessly, letting his momentum carry him forward. Her gloves moved like extensions of her own body, precise and controlled. But then, in a moment of miscalculation, Jake aimed a second punch too fast, too powerful. The glove connected sharply with his temple. Time seemed to freeze. The gym echoed with the sound of impact, stumbled, her legs buckling beneath her. Then everything went black. The crowd's laughter faltered, replaced by shocked gasps. A silence fell over the gym as Coach Miller rushed forward. "Are you okay?" he called, kneeling beside her. Her body lay still on the mat, her chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. Jake's smirk faltered, replaced by a faint flicker of concern. He had expected her to fall once, maybe twice, but this wasn't supposed to happen. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, stirred, her eyelids fluttering. She blinked, groggy pain radiating from her temple, but there was a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before, or maybe it had always been there, just buried beneath doubt and nerves. The boys whispered among themselves. "She's still breathing," one said. Another muttered, "She's crazy." His gaze moved slowly across the gym. She looked at Jake, who avoided her eyes. She looked at the others, and instead of anger, she felt a strange calm settling over her. Humiliation, yes, she had been knocked out in front of the entire team, but she felt something stronger than embarrassment. She felt focus. She felt determination. Coach Miller helped her to her feet. "Take the rest of the day off," he said gently. "You've been through a lot." Shook her head. "No," she whispered, "I'm not done." And in that moment, a quiet storm began to brew inside Carson, one that would not be ignored, one that would not be stopped. She wasn't just the new girl who got knocked out. She was the girl who would rise, stronger and smarter, ready to rewrite the story the gym thought it knew. That night lay awake in her small room, staring at her gloves on the desk. The city lights from outside her window cast long shadows across the floor. She remembered every punch, every step, every glance in the gym that day. She thought of her mother, who had taught her discipline, patience, and the art of timing, and she whispered into the darkness, almost as if speaking to her mother. "I'll show them, Mom. I'll show them everything." And for the first time in weeks, she smiled, not the timid smile of a girl trying to fit in, but the determined smile of a fighter ready to take her place. The next morning, High's gym was buzzing with energy. The boxing team warmed up, skipping ropes slapping the wooden floor, gloves thumping against punching bags, the rhythmic echo of discipline and arrogance. Carson's arrival went mostly unnoticed at first. She walked calmly to her locker, pulled out her gloves and began stretching methodically, her movements precise, almost ritualistic. Yet it wasn't long before the whispers started. Jake Dawson, the gym's unspoken king, spotted her immediately. He had barely recovered from the shock of seeing her knocked out the day before, and though he refused to admit it, curiosity had him fixated. "Hey, new girl," he called, voice dripping with false confidence. "You really planning to get up today, or are you sticking with the floor routine?" The boys nearby laughed, echoing Jake's mockery. The gym's atmosphere shifted. It was no longer about training. It was about proving dominance, about watching the new girl either fold or rise. Looked up from her stretching, eyes calm, unwavering. She didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any roar Jake could muster. Coach Miller approached, his steps deliberate. "Remember, today's just warm-ups. Don't push too hard." His voice was gentle but firm, the kind that carried years of experience and subtle warning. Nodded, a slight smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I'm ready," she said quietly, almost to herself. And that was all Jake needed. He strutted to the center of the ring, rolling his shoulders, cracking his knuckles, a show of bravado. "All right, let's see if you've got anything left," he sneered. "Round 2, newbie. You might want to stay on your toes." The gym gathered around the ring, forming a tight circle. Some students whispered excitedly, others exchanged skeptical looks. "She doesn't stand a chance," one of the boys said. "He's huge compared to her." Didn't flinch. She climbed into the ring with the grace of someone who had done this before. Her posture was calm, confident, yet she wasn't cocky. She rolled her shoulders, stretched her neck, and raised her gloves ready. She could feel the sweat on her palms, the tightness in her legs, the familiar rhythm of her heartbeat. The adrenaline wasn't fear, it was focus. Coach Miller raised his hand. "One round. Light contact, remember," he warned Jake. Jake laughed but nodded, though his smirk betrayed the eagerness to dominate. The bell rang. Jake charged immediately, a wide swing aiming for her temple, shifted lightly, letting his momentum carry him forward. The crowd gasped. She was moving too quickly, slipping past his reach with fluid precision. He jabbed again, faster this time, and ducked low, her glove brushing his shoulder as she pivoted. The tension in the gym was electric. No one had expected her to move so effortlessly. Even Jake blinked, briefly thrown off balance. Not bad," he muttered under his breath, a flicker of respect hiding behind his frustration. Struck with a series of quick jabs, not forceful but accurate. Each hit found its mark on Jake's torso and arms, showing precision over raw strength. The gym's murmurs grew louder. "Did you see that?" one student whispered. "She's fast." Another nodded, eyes wide. "Yeah, and she's not scared." But then Jake's pride got the better of him. He threw a heavy right hook, aiming to end it quickly. Tried to dodge, but the punch landed squarely on her jaw. Pain exploded through her skull. The gym froze. Her knees buckled and she staggered backward, her vision momentarily blurring. She could hear laughter from the boys around the ring, but it was faint, distant, almost like it belonged to someone else. Pain shot through her jaw, her head spinning, yet she clenched her fists and shook it off. The world seemed to slow. Every sound, every movement, every breath was sharp, clear, and deliberate. She remembered her mother's words. "Control your body, control your fight. Don't react, respond." His eyes narrowed. She could feel the fire building inside her, not anger, not revenge, but determination. Every step Jake took was predictable. Every swing was a pattern, and had learned patterns since she was a child. She had been knocked down before, figuratively and literally, but every time she rose stronger, faster, smarter. Jake's next swing and countered with a swift hook to his side. He stumbled, the smirk slipping from his face. Moved like water, precise and fluid, her movements a combination of agility and instinct. She wasn't trying to overpower him, she was outsmarting him. The gym erupted in whispers and exclamations. "She's amazing," one student yelled. Another shouted, "Go!" The energy shifted. No longer was it mockery, it was awe. Jake, flustered and growing desperate, swung wildly, ducked, twisted, and landed a series of blows, quick jabs, precise hooks, each one sending Jake off balance. It was a display of skill, strategy, and heart. He tried to regain his composure, swinging harder, but anticipated every movement, slipping past each punch with uncanny timing. Finally, with one perfectly timed cross struck Jake's jaw. The impact rocked him backward. For a moment the gym fell silent. Jake blinked, trying to understand what had happened. He had been overpowered not by strength but by control, precision, and sheer determination. He stumbled, shaking his head, and finally collapsed to one knee, breathing heavily. The gym erupted not in laughter but in disbelief and admiration. Students cheered, some clapped, stood in the center of the ring, gloves raised, her chest heaving but her expression calm. She didn't celebrate. She didn't mock. She just lowered her gloves slightly and looked at Jake. Jake, still kneeling, shook his head. You're something else," he said, voice rough. The respect in it was unmistakable. Coach Miller stepped forward, placing a hand on shoulder. "That's enough," he said quietly. "You've made your point." Nodded. Her heart was still racing, but she felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. She had been knocked down before, she had been underestimated, mocked, and humiliated. But this time she had responded, not reacted, and in doing so she had claimed her place in the gym. Later that evening, sat alone on the roof of her house, looking at the sky above. The stars were distant and silent, but she felt them watching, steady and constant. She touched her gloves, now resting by her side, and whispered, "I'm just getting started, Mom. I'm just getting started." And in that moment, Carson's quiet storm, the storm that would shake High's gym, its boxing team, and even her own limits, had begun to roar. She wasn't just fighting opponents. She was fighting expectations, underestimation, and doubt. And she was winning. Carson woke to a dull ache pulsing through her temple. The faint light of morning spilled through the slats of her blinds, casting stripes across her bedroom floor. Her body felt heavy, her limbs uncooperative, as if each movement required effort far beyond the ordinary. The events of the previous day swirled in her mind like fragments of a nightmare. The gym, the laughter, the sound of Jake Dawson's glove connecting with her skull, and the cold floor beneath her. She sat up slowly, pressing her palms to her aching temples, letting out a long, quiet breath. The house was still. Her father had already left for work, leaving the small Texas to Ohio move echoing in silence around her. His eyes fell on the worn leather gloves resting on her desk. They were more than just equipment. They were memory, ritual, and connection to her mother. She reached for them instinctively, fingertips brushing the familiar stitching. Not like this, she thought, jaw tightening. Humiliation, yes, had burned deeply, but it wasn't a defeat she intended to accept. By mid-morning, the whispers and laughs from High echoed in her mind. She could still hear them, taunting her from the gym bleachers. She's nothing. She won't last. Closed her eyes and let the voices fade. She remembered something her mother had told her years ago during a particularly rough training session. You control the fight by controlling yourself. Reacting is weakness. Responding is strength. Strength, that word pulsed like a heartbeat in her chest. It wasn't about brute force. It was about control, timing, and precision. And she intended to master it. Spent the morning quietly moving through stretches and shadowboxing routines she had practiced since childhood. Her movements were deliberate, her eyes focused. She imagined the punches from Jake, the mocking laughter, and every jab landed on the floor. But instead of anger, she felt calm resolve. She analyzed, adjusted, and refined every motion, footwork, guard position, breathing, as if replaying a fight on a mental screen, correcting each flaw. By afternoon, she ventured outside. The streets were quiet, lined with small houses and leaf-strewn sidewalks. Laced up her sneakers tightly, wrapping her wrists, and began running. Each step was purposeful, building stamina and endurance. Her mind replayed every second of the knockout, every swing, every missed punch. She imagined Jake's gloves again and again, learning the rhythm of his attacks, anticipating his moves before they came. When she returned home, bruises now forming across her jaw and cheekbones reminded her of her body's limits. Yet there was a strange satisfaction in the ache. Pain was a teacher, it marked progress. Walked into the basement, which she had turned into a makeshift training space. Old punching bags hung from the beams, gloves scattered across the floor, and the faint smell of liniment lingered from previous sessions. She wrapped her hands, each turn of the tape precise, almost ceremonial. The bag swayed gently as began her routine. Jabs, hooks, uppercuts, all executed with a meticulous focus. Every punch was measured, deliberate, controlled. She wasn't swinging to impress anyone. She was swinging to perfect herself, to regain her equilibrium, and to rise from yesterday's defeat stronger than before. Sweat soaked through her shirt, mixing with the sting of bruises and the sharp tang of determination. Hours passed unnoticed. Mind sharpened as her body moved instinctively. She visualized her opponent, Jake, his arrogance, his overconfidence, every swing predictable. With each repetition, she learned the timing of his attacks, the trajectory of his punches, and how to exploit weaknesses without resorting to force. Her movements became almost dance-like, flowing with the rhythm of control and strategy. Evening came and streets grew silent once more. Paused, breathing heavily, and stared at the dimly lit horizon. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, bruised, exhausted, yet focused. She traced the outline of her mother's old training journal, lying on the table nearby. Every word, every diagram, every sketch of footwork and guard techniques was now a roadmap for her resurgence. Dinner was quiet. Her father noticed the bruises, concern knitting his brows. "Are you okay?" he asked cautiously, the soft worry in his tone betraying his pride. She simply nodded. "I'm fine," she said, her voice calm but firm. It wasn't just reassurance, it was a declaration. She wasn't just fine, she was preparing, building, growing. That night lay in bed, tracing imaginary rings on the ceiling. Her mind replayed her mistakes, each movement, each slip, each hit. She corrected them mentally, refining her responses, anticipating attacks before they happened. The fire inside her was no longer anger or fear, it was strategy. She felt it thrumming in her chest, steady and powerful. This is what it means to rise, she thought. This is what it means to fight smarter. Sleep came eventually, but it was brief. Her dreams were vivid, flashes of gloves connecting, rings, roaring crowds, and the echo of Jake's laughter. Yet even in dreams she moved like a shadow, avoiding, slipping, striking with precision. She woke repeatedly, testing her punches in the air, tightening her stance, imagining each possible scenario, each swing, each counter. By morning had formed a plan. She would return to the gym, but not the same girl who had been knocked out. She would enter with calm confidence, prepared for every move, anticipating every swing. The humiliation would fuel her, not define her. She had trained alone, tirelessly, learning to master both her body and mind. The new wasn't just a fighter, she was a strategist, precise and lethal, yet composed. As she stepped out of her house that morning, the air crisp and cool, she felt the city differently. Wasn't an obstacle, it was a proving ground. Every street, every shadowed corner, every quiet alleyway had witnessed her determination. She tightened her gloves, adjusted her stance, and took a deep breath. She wasn't going to the gym to participate. She was going there to command respect, to earn it, and to reclaim her power. By the time she reached high, whispers began again. Students had already heard about yesterday's knockout. Jake Dawson, lounging by the punching bags, saw her coming. He smirked, bracing himself for a repeat performance. But this time didn't hesitate, didn't flinch, and didn't give him the satisfaction of doubt. The air in the gym shifted immediately. There was tension, yes, but also curiosity, anticipation, and unexpectedly respect. Eyes met Jake's, steady and unwavering. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her presence alone spoke volumes. The new girl was no longer just someone to laugh at. She was someone to watch, someone to reckon with. Coach Miller stepped forward, sensing the shift. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "I'm ready," she said, not loud, not brash, but firm. The words carried authority, the kind that comes from true preparation, hard work, and unwavering focus. And in that instant, Carson became more than a new girl at high. She became a storm in motion, calm on the surface, relentless underneath, a force that would not be ignored. And the storm was ready to strike. The gym smelled of sweat, leather, and tension when Carson walked through the doors. The usual hum of activity, skipping ropes, gloves against bags, laughter and chatter, suddenly faltered. Whispers rippled through the students. Some nudged each other. Others stared openly. "She's back," someone said, barely above a whisper. Jake Dawson, lounging casually by the ring, caught sight of her. His smirk spread across his face, an expression that said, "This will be easy." "You back for round 2, he called, voice loud enough for the entire gym to hear. His friends chuckled, eager to witness another spectacle. Didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her posture, calm and deliberate, spoke louder than any words could. She adjusted her gloves, rolling her shoulders in preparation, her eyes steady on Jake. Every movement was measured, deliberate, confident, and unshakable. Coach Miller, standing at the edge of the ring, frowned. "You don't have to do this. You've already proven yourself." His voice carried both caution and concern, but shook her head, calm but firm. "I'm not proving anything," she said quietly. "I'm finishing what I started." The gym went silent. Even Jake's grin faltered for a brief moment, replaced by something sharper, curiosity and perhaps unease. He had expected submission, fear, or at least hesitation, but eyes radiated focus, control, and unwavering determination. She was no longer the new girl. She was a contender. Coach Miller sighed and nodded. "One more round. Light contact for safety," he instructed. Jake rolled his eyes but stepped into the ring, assuming dominance would come easily. The bell rang. Jake lunged immediately, swinging his massive fists with force and arrogance, but was ready. She had spent hours, days, perfecting every slip, duck, and pivot. She moved as if she had anticipated every swing in advance. The first punch Jake threw glanced harmlessly off her shoulder as she shifted to the side, her footwork precise and fluid. The gym erupted in whispers of disbelief. She's moving like a shadow," one student exclaimed. Another added, "Did you see that? She didn't even flinch." Strategy was clear. Avoid unnecessary confrontation, conserve energy, and strike only when there was an opening. She wasn't trying to overpower Jake, she was outsmarting him. Each movement was deliberate, designed to destabilize, confuse, and expose weaknesses. Jake swung again, faster this time, a hook aimed at her jaw. Anticipated it, pivoting with a smooth, controlled motion. Her glove brushed past his arm, and in one fluid movement she countered with a sharp, precise left hook to his torso. Jake staggered, eyes widening. He had underestimated her. The tension in the gym was palpable. Students leaned forward, unable to look away. The whispers turned into murmurs of admiration and astonishment. Jake's friends were speechless, their earlier laughter replaced by disbelief. Even the other boxers on the team paused, realizing that was no longer the underdog they had dismissed. Jake's pride refused to allow him to falter. He swung again, this time with more force, hopping to catch her off guard. But his movements had become second nature, a combination of training, instinct, and calm focus. She dodged, slipped, and landed a series of precise jabs, each one finding its mark, destabilizing Jake further. Coach Miller watched silently, a mixture of pride and amazement in his eyes. He had seen countless fighters, but few had such composure under pressure, such clarity of purpose. Every motion screamed control, discipline, and intelligence, the very qualities that separated champions from the rest. Jake, growing frustrated, began swinging wildly, trying to regain dominance through brute force, but remained calm. She ducked, slipped, and countered with a hook that landed flush on his side. The gym fell silent for a split second, the sound of impact echoing like a gunshot. Jake stumbled, losing his footing, shock replacing arrogance on his face. Didn't pause. She shifted, maintaining her stance, eyes locked on Jake's movements. Another precise combination, jab, cross, hook, found its target, each punch executed with purpose and efficiency. For the first time, Jake realized he was outmatched, not in strength, but in strategy, precision, and mental fortitude. The crowd held its breath, moved like water flowing around Jake's attacks, striking with the quiet authority of someone who had truly mastered their craft. With one final cross, she landed squarely on his jaw. Jake's legs wobbled, and he collapsed to the mat, breathless and stunned. Silence filled the gym. The laughter, mockery, and disbelief of the past were replaced by awe. The students stared, wide-eyed, some clapping softly, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Lowered her gloves slightly, calm and composed, her breathing steady. She hadn't yelled, she hadn't celebrated, she simply stood there, victorious through focus and skill. Jake, still kneeling, looked up at her with a mixture of respect, shock, and newfound humility. You're no joke," he muttered, his voice rough. The smirk was gone, replaced by acknowledgement. Coach Miller stepped into the ring, placing a firm hand on shoulder. "Enough. That's enough." His eyes met hers, silently conveying admiration and a quiet warning. "Don't let this go to your head." Nodded. She didn't need words to convey her understanding. She had proven her strength, her strategy, and her resilience. She wasn't the new girl anymore. She was a force, respected and acknowledged. The gym remained quiet for a moment longer, the energy charged with a mixture of shock, admiration, and the realization that the hierarchy had shifted. Students slowly resumed their activities, whispers following wherever she went. Jake rose to his feet, brushing himself off, and extended a hand. "Truce?" he asked, a wry smile returning. Shook his hand, a small, calm gesture of acknowledgement rather than celebration. "Truce," she said. Later, alone in the gym, leaned against the ropes, breathing steadily. The adrenaline still coursed through her veins, but she felt a deep satisfaction. She had not only faced her first real challenge, but had done so with control, intelligence, and precision. She had risen from humiliation, transforming it into triumph. As she left the gym that evening, the sunset casting long shadows across the town, thought of her mother. "This is only the beginning," she whispered to herself. I've proven today that I can rise, that I can adapt, and that I can overcome. The town of had seen a new girl arrive timidly and leave a storm in her wake. Carson had claimed her place, not through brute strength, not through arrogance, but through discipline, intelligence, and an unwavering resolve. And the storm had only just begun. The gym had never been quieter, and yet it had never been more alive. Carson stood in the center of the ring, gloves lowered, breathing steady, her chest rising and falling like a metronome. Every eye in the room was on her, some wide with disbelief, some brimming with admiration, and a few, begrudgingly, filled with respect. Jake Dawson sat on the edge of the ring, still recovering from the precision and ferocity he had just experienced. The echoes of the fight reverberated in the room, though the round had ended moments ago. Nobody spoke immediately. There was a pause, a collective intake of breath, as if the gym itself were catching its bearings. The boys who had mocked her days earlier now looked at differently. The quiet, intense new girl they had underestimated had transformed, in a matter of minutes, into someone untouchable in their eyes. Coach Miller walked toward the center, placing a steadying hand on shoulder. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying both authority and admiration. "You've made your point." He glanced around the gym, noting the mixture of astonishment and newfound respect on the faces of the students. "You've earned it." Nodded, her expression calm but unwavering. She hadn't thrown the fight to humiliate anyone, nor had she wanted to gloat. Her victory wasn't about dominance. It was about proving to herself that she could rise, recover, and succeed even after humiliation. Her movements, her timing, her control, all spoke of a fighter who had embraced discipline over arrogance. Jake finally stood, brushing off his sweat and adjusting his gloves. There was a long pause as he met eyes. Then, with a mixture of awe and humility, he extended a hand. You're the real deal," he said, voice low but sincere. He hadn't laughed once. He hadn't tried to cover his defeat with bravado. Instead, he acknowledged the skill, strategy, and composure that had displayed. Accepted his handshake with quiet dignity. "Thank you," she replied softly. There was no triumph in her tone, only calm acknowledgement. This was not a fight of pride or ego, it was a fight of skill, focus, and resilience. And she had won, not just in the ring, but in spirit. As the gym resumed its usual activities, whispers continued. "Did you see that?" a freshman asked another. She didn't even move wrong once." "Yeah," the friend replied, eyes wide. "And Jake, he's usually untouchable. She took him down." The conversation rippled through the room, spreading like wildfire. Carson's name was now synonymous with precision, determination, and quiet strength. For though the fight was over, she left the ring, gloves heavy but her mind light. This was only the beginning. She knew she had taken the first steps toward something greater, something beyond the confines of high. Yet even in victory, there was a lesson to be learned. Humility, control, and patience were as important as strength. That evening returned home bruised but not beaten, exhausted but exhilarated. Her father noticed the swelling around her jaw and the faint cuts on her knuckles. He said softly, worry clear in his eyes, "Are you sure this is safe?" She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried confidence without arrogance. "I'm fine, Dad. I've learned a lot today." In her bedroom, removed her gloves carefully and inspected the small cuts and bruises. She traced the patterns of her movements in her mind, the slips, pivots, and counters that had allowed her to dominate Jake in seconds. Each motion had been deliberate, calculated, and executed with precision. She felt the thrill of the fight, but also a deep sense of responsibility. This wasn't about defeating someone else. It was about mastering herself. The next day at school, her reputation had already begun to spread. Students whispered in the hallways, and teachers nodded in quiet acknowledgement as passed. Even the students who had once doubted her now approached with cautious admiration. Her victory had become a symbol, not of arrogance or raw strength, but of perseverance, intelligence, and self-control. Coach Miller took her aside after practice. "You handled that better than I could have imagined," he said. "But remember, respect is earned continuously. Talent alone isn't enough." Nodded, understanding that this was just one step. She wasn't content to be the girl who had bested Jake Dawson once. She wanted more. She wanted to compete, to test her skills, and to prove that her discipline and strategy could withstand any challenge. With renewed focus, began training in earnest. Mornings were devoted to running through quiet streets, her sneakers striking the pavement in a rhythmic cadence that matched her heartbeat. Afternoons were for skill drills, shadow boxing, and repetition, refining every movement she had learned from her mother's training videos. Evenings were for reviewing matches, studying opponents, and mentally preparing for the next challenge. Her father watched her silently from the sidelines, initially hesitant about her dedication to boxing. Yet as he observed her resolve, the precision of her movements, and the quiet intensity in her eyes, he began to understand. Wasn't fighting for attention or ego. She was fighting to honor her mother's teachings, to grow stronger, and to master herself. Within weeks had entered her first official match for the school-level boxing tournament. She faced opponents older, bigger, and more experienced than she had ever fought before, but was ready. Every punch was calculated, every movement measured, and every counter executed with calm precision. She dominated her matches, winning each round by unanimous decision, her strategy and skill leaving spectators in awe. When her hand was raised in victory at the final match, felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with recognition or applause. She had grown beyond the girl who had been knocked out in the gym. She had transformed humiliation into discipline, weakness into resilience, and doubt into power. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. A real fighter doesn't just hit hard, she fights smart. Even Jake, who had once dominated the gym with arrogance, began to show her respect. He approached after practice one afternoon, offering a nod of acknowledgement. "You've changed the game, Carson," he said. There was no malice, no condescension, only recognition of her skill and determination. Nodded in return, silently accepting the unspoken truce. By the end of the month's reputation was firmly established. Students looked to her as a symbol of resilience and skill, teachers saw her as a disciplined and focused athlete, and the gym had been transformed. The hierarchy had shifted. Carson was no longer just the new girl, she was a force to be reckoned with. As she sat in her room that night, gloves laid neatly on her desk, reflected on the journey so far. Every step, every punch, every bruise had led her here. And yet she knew this was only the beginning. Competitions, challenges, and opponents still awaited, but felt ready. She had discovered not just her skill, but her strength, her strategy, and her resolve. Tomorrow, the gym would witness her rise further, her reputation would continue to grow, and the world beyond high would slowly begin to notice. Carson had turned humiliation into triumph, fear into focus, and doubt into determination. And in the quiet moments of reflection, she understood one truth. The fight wasn't just in the ring. It was in her heart, her mind, and her spirit, and she had won that fight already. By the time the next month rolled around, Carson had become more than just a name whispered in the halls of high. She had become a legend in her own right. Her victories in the gym and in school-level tournaments had cemented her reputation as a fighter with unmatched precision and an uncanny ability to adapt to any opponent, but was not content. Every punch she threw, every dodge she executed, every strategy she planned was another step toward something greater, a stage where her skills would truly be tested. The early morning air was crisp as laced up her gloves in the quiet of her home. The streets were still asleep, the house is dark, and the only sound was the steady rhythm of her sneakers striking the pavement. She ran without thinking, her mind in a meditative state, each breath measured, each step deliberate. She imagined herself in a ring, the crowd roaring, her opponents circling, every swing, dodge, and counter already mapped out in her mind. Returning home shifted her focus to skill drills and technique. Every motion was precise. Jabs, crosses, hooks, uppercuts, each executed with mathematical accuracy. Her shadow boxing reflected a mastery of rhythm and timing. Even the smallest movement mattered. The angle of her foot, the rotation of her hips, the tilt of her head. She visualized opponents, predicting attacks before they came, practicing counters until they became instinct. Coach Miller had noticed her dedication. He had trained fighters for decades, but few had the combination of talent, discipline, and mental focus that displayed. "You're getting faster, smarter, and stronger," he said one afternoon after a grueling session. "But remember, speed alone doesn't win matches. Strategy, awareness, and endurance are just as important. Never stop thinking ahead." Nodded silently, absorbing every word, every lesson, every critique, turning them into fuel for her training. His father, once hesitant about her passion for boxing, had grown to understand the depth of her commitment. He watched from the sidelines during practice, impressed not just by her skill but by her unwavering discipline. Was no longer fighting to prove herself to others. She was fighting to refine herself, to honor her mother's memory, and to master the art she had inherited. The state-level tournament approached faster than expected. Registered quietly, avoiding the attention of the local media and townspeople who had begun to take notice. She wanted her skills to speak for themselves. Her first match was against a girl 2 years older and with a weight advantage, but precision and speed proved decisive. She moved with a fluidity that her opponent couldn't anticipate, landing clean punches while dodging attacks with ease. The crowd watched in awe as outmaneuvered her opponent, securing a unanimous decision in her favor. The victory was exhilarating but didn't linger in celebration. She was already analyzing the next opponent, studying her weaknesses and planning strategies. Each match was a learning opportunity, a chance to sharpen her reflexes, strengthen her mind, and improve her endurance. Her mother's teachings echoed in every move. Discipline, patience, precision. Wasn't just winning matches, she was mastering herself. Her second match proved even more challenging. The opponent was aggressive, using raw power to try to overwhelm, but training had prepared her for exactly this scenario. She slipped, countered, and maintained distance, turning her opponent's strength into her own advantage. The bell rang and his hand was raised again, but this time, the applause carried more weight. Spectators could sense that was different. She wasn't just a competitor. She was a tactician, a strategist, and a force of nature. News of victory spread quickly. The whispers from High's halls had reached other schools, and soon, spectators from neighboring towns came to witness her matches. Even Jake Dawson had started following her progress, watching quietly from the gym during practice, nodding in respect at each technique she refined. What had started as rivalry had transformed into a mutual acknowledgement of skill and discipline. The semifinals brought face-to-face with a formidable opponent, the reigning champion of the district, a girl known for both her power and speed. Studied her carefully, analyzing her movement, predicting her swings, and calculating counters. The match began with explosive energy. Each punch, dodge, and feint was a test of skill, stamina, and mental fortitude. Training allowed her to anticipate attacks, counter effectively, and maintain control of the ring. The crowd roared with every precise combination executed. She moved like a shadow, light on her feet, reacting and countering with flawless timing. Her opponent swung with raw power, but awareness, strategy, and precision neutralized every attempt. Each punch was calculated, each movement deliberate. Sweat dripped from her brow, her lungs burned, but her mind remained clear and focused. As the final round began, saw the opening she had been waiting for. She executed a combination of jabs and hooks that shifted the momentum entirely. Her opponent staggered and moved in with controlled precision, landing the final, decisive punch that secured her victory. The referee raised her hand, signaling her as the winner. His chest rose and fell with exertion, but her eyes remained steady, calm, and focused. The applause was thunderous. Spectators rushed forward to congratulate her, students from her school cheered, and even her father and Coach Miller shared proud smiles. Had not only won the semifinals but had her reputation as an extraordinary fighter, someone who combined skill, strategy, and resilience in a way few could match. But knew this was only the beginning. The final match awaited, and with it, a greater challenge. Her victory had proven her abilities, but it had also drawn attention from stronger, faster, and more experienced opponents. She spent the night reviewing her performance, identifying areas for improvement, and planning her strategy for the championship match. That evening sat quietly in her room, gloves beside her, reflecting on the journey so far. From the first day she had stepped into High's gym, laughed at and underestimated, to this moment of near district-level dominance, had transformed. Every challenge had taught her discipline, every setback had taught her resilience, and every victory had taught her humility. She remembered her mother's words: "The fight is not won with your fists alone. It is won with your mind, your heart, and your spirit." Carson had embodied those teachings, turning each lesson into strength. And now, standing on the brink of the championship, she was ready to prove that her journey was only beginning. As she closed her eyes that night, allowed herself a brief smile. The road ahead was uncertain, the challenges immense, but she felt prepared. Every punch thrown, every dodge executed, every match fought had led her to this point. The championship was not just a test of skill, it was a test of her spirit. And Carson had already shown that her spirit was unbreakable. Tomorrow she would enter the final match, not as the new girl, not as the underdog, but as a fighter who had risen through adversity, mastered her craft, and earned the right to stand among champions. And was ready. The day of the championship had arrived, and High's gym had been transformed into a roaring arena. Banners of local sponsors lined the walls, and a buzzing crowd of spectators filled every available seat. Carson walked into the gym with calm determination. The energy in the air was electric, but unlike past matches, she did not feel nervous. She was focused, collected, and entirely in control of her mind and body. The tournament had been grueling, had fought and defeated the best fighters from surrounding towns, each match more challenging than the last. Now she faced the reigning state champion, a girl named Vanessa Morales. Known for her speed, strength, and unpredictability, Vanessa was undefeated for 3 years. Her reputation preceded her, and whispers of her prowess filled the gym. Students and coaches alike anticipated a clash of titans. Adjusted her gloves, rolling her shoulders, and glanced toward the ring. Vanessa was already there, bouncing lightly on her feet, eyes sharp and calculating. She smirked at the kind of confident expression that said, "I've never been beaten and I don't intend to start today," but didn't flinch. Her focus remained unwavering, her strategy clear. She had prepared for every possibility, visualized every scenario, and studied her opponent carefully. Coach Miller leaned close, his voice low but steady. "Remember, this isn't about strength alone. Use your mind, anticipate her moves, control the pace." Nodded, taking a deep breath. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "The fight is in your head first, then in your body. Stay calm, stay precise." The bell rang. Vanessa struck immediately, throwing a rapid combination of jabs and hooks aimed to test reflexes, but had anticipated this. She slipped, twisted, and countered with a precise hook that landed on Vanessa's side. The crowd gasped. The fight had begun with a display of intelligence and skill rather than raw aggression. Vanessa adjusted quickly, circling, trying to create openings. Her speed was incredible and she used feints to lure into overcommitting. But training had honed her instincts. She remained calm, shifting her weight, maintaining her guard, and observing Vanessa's patterns. Every punch she threw was calculated, every dodge precise. The first round continued with an electric back and forth. Vanessa's power threatened to overwhelm, but precision and timing kept her safe. She countered strategically, using Vanessa's aggression against her, slipping past attacks and landing blows that destabilized the champion. The crowd was on its feet, cheering every move. Whispers filled the gym. "She's keeping up. How is she doing that?" By the second round, both fighters were breathing heavily. Sweat glistened on their brows and muscles burned but remained focused. She had learned long ago that the fight wasn't won by brute force alone. She needed endurance, timing, and the ability to read her opponent. Every feint, every jab, every swing was analyzed and responded to in real time. Vanessa tried a risky maneuver, a wide hook aimed to finish the match quickly, anticipated it perfectly, ducking low and slipping to the side. In a single fluid motion, she countered with a combination that struck Vanessa's side and shoulder, causing the champion to stumble. The crowd erupted, sensing a turning point. Precision had created the opening she needed. The final round was approaching and tension gripped the gym. Both fighters were exhausted, but determination burned in their eyes. Could feel her heartbeat, steady and controlled despite the adrenaline. She remembered every hour of training, every morning run, every shadow boxing session. Everything had led to this moment. Vanessa swung again, faster and more unpredictable. Eyes narrowed, tracking every motion. She pivoted and landed a clean hook to Vanessa's torso. The champion faltered, showing the first sign of vulnerability. Seized the opportunity, pressing her advantage with a calculated series of jabs and crosses, each precise and controlled. Vanessa struggled to maintain her rhythm, each counter from forcing her to react instead of act. The crowd was electrified. Every punch, every movement was met with gasps, cheers, and shouts. Strategy was unfolding perfectly. She had anticipated Vanessa's style, adapted in real time, and maintained control of the fight from start to finish. Finally, in the last 30 seconds of the round, saw the opening she had been waiting for. Vanessa threw a wild swing, overcommitting in an attempt to regain dominance. Slipped past, pivoted, and delivered a flawless combination jab, cross, hook that landed squarely and decisively. Vanessa staggered and the bell rang. Both fighters lowered their gloves, breathing heavily. The referee stepped forward, raising his hand in victory. The gym exploded in cheers. Carson had defeated the undefeated champion. She had not only proven her skill and strategy but also her perseverance, mental strength, and ability to rise under pressure. Vanessa looked up at, a mixture of shock, admiration, and newfound respect in her eyes. You're incredible," she said quietly. Nodded, acknowledging the compliment without arrogance. "Thank you," she replied, calm and composed. Coach Miller approached, pride evident on his face. "You did it," he said simply. "You've earned every bit of this." Smiled faintly, knowing that the victory was more than just a trophy. It was a testament to her growth, resilience, and dedication. That night, as lay in bed, gloves neatly beside her, she reflected on her journey. From the new girl who had been knocked out in the gym to the undefeated champion, every moment had shaped her. The humiliation, the rigorous training, the victories, the setbacks, all had forged her into a fighter capable of rising above any challenge. Understood now that true strength wasn't just about landing punches. It was about mastering the mind, the body, and the heart. It was about discipline, strategy, patience, and resilience. And she had proven all of these qualities, not just to her opponents but to herself. As sleep finally claimed her, Carson knew that this victory was not the end. It was a milestone, a chapter in a story that was far from over. More challenges awaited, more fights, more opportunities to test her skills and spirit, and was ready. She had faced doubt, humiliation, and fear, and she had risen above them all. The new girl who had once been knocked out in seconds had transformed into a force that nobody, not even the undefeated champion, could ignore. The storm had arrived, and it was just beginning. The gym had never felt smaller, yet the weight of triumph hung heavier than the crowd could measure. Carson stood in the center of the ring, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths, gloves lowered and eyes steady. The championship trophy sat at the corner of the ring, gleaming under the overhead lights, a symbol of every hour she had spent running, punching, slipping, and planning. But victory was more than a trophy. It was proof. Proof that determination, discipline, and intelligence could triumph over raw power. Proof that the quiet girl who had been knocked out in seconds had transformed into a force of nature. Proof that resilience and strategy were as formidable as strength. As she exited the gym, the crowd continued to cheer, students shouting her name, cameras flashing, and whispers of admiration following her like a shadow. walked through the hallways of High with the calm confidence of someone who had earned respect not through intimidation, but through action. Even those who had doubted her, classmates, teammates, and former rivals alike, now nodded in acknowledgement. Jake Dawson approached her quietly, holding out his hand. "You've changed everything," he said, his voice low and sincere. "Not just for you, but for all of us. You've shown what it means to be a real fighter." Shook his hand, her expression serene. "Thank you," she replied simply. There was no arrogance in her voice, no need to boast. The fight had spoken for her. In the days that followed, life changed subtly but unmistakably. Invitations came from neighboring towns for sparring sessions, and coaches reached out to discuss training and tournaments. Her reputation as a disciplined, strategic, and unstoppable fighter spread far beyond. For the recognition was secondary. What mattered was mastery over herself, the ability to remain calm under pressure, to anticipate challenges, and to respond with precision and thought. Back at home, found a quiet moment to reflect. The bruises on her knuckles had faded, and the soreness in her muscles had become a reminder of her growth. Her father watched her train in the basement one evening, a quiet pride in his eyes. "You've come so far," he said, voice thick with emotion, paused mid-punch, her gaze softening. "It wasn't about proving them wrong," she replied. "It was about proving to myself that I could rise, that I could fight smarter, not just harder." The memory of her first day at High, when laughter and doubt had filled the gym, seemed distant now. She could still recall the sting of humiliation, the sharp pain of being knocked down, and the frustration of being underestimated. But those moments had forged her spirit, creating the foundation for the fighter she had become. Every step, every punch, every counter had been built on the lessons of resilience, patience, and intelligence. This journey wasn't just about winning fights. It was about mastering fear, transforming doubt into determination, and turning setbacks into stepping stones. Each match she fought had tested not only her physical skill but her mental fortitude. She had learned to control her mind, to stay calm in chaos, and to see patterns that others overlooked. The championship had opened doors she had never imagined. Coaches from regional and national competitions began to notice her. Invitations arrived for training camps and sparring sessions with elite fighters. Faced a choice: remain in, where she had grown and earned respect, or step into a larger world filled with new challenges and stronger opponents. She understood that true growth required courage, the courage to leave familiarity behind and test herself against the best. One afternoon, as trained in the quiet of the gym, she caught her reflection in the mirrors lining the wall. The girl who had once been knocked out by Jake Dawson stared back at her, bruised, underestimated, and unsure. And next to her, reflected in the same glass, was the girl she had become: composed, precise, resilient, and unstoppable. Smiled faintly. It wasn't pride or arrogance. It was recognition of the journey, of the struggle, and of the triumph that had transformed her. Her mother's words echoed in her mind once more. A real fighter doesn't just hit hard, she fights smart, fights with heart, and never gives up. Understood now that fighting was not just about physical skill. It was about mental agility, emotional resilience, and unwavering determination. It was about learning to rise when knocked down, to see opportunity in adversity, and to trust oneself completely. Word of victories reached beyond, and soon, journalists and sports enthusiasts began to follow her progress. She received letters and messages from aspiring fighters, students, and even adults who were inspired by her story. Her journey became a beacon of resilience, determination, and intelligence, proof that with focus and discipline, anyone could overcome challenges that seemed insurmountable. Yet despite the attention and accolades, remained grounded. She continued her rigorous training, her early morning runs, her shadow boxing, and her study of opponents. She understood that growth never ended. There would always be a stronger opponent, a tougher challenge, or a situation that tested her resolve. But she also knew that she was ready for whatever came next. His father watched her one evening, observing the transformation in his daughter. "You've changed everything," he said softly, "not just in the ring, but in the way you face life." Paused, gloves resting on her shoulders. "It's not about proving anyone wrong," she said. "It's about proving to myself that I can rise no matter what." Months passed and continued to compete, each match pushing her limits further. She traveled beyond, facing elite fighters, learning new techniques, and testing herself in arenas she had once only dreamed of. Each victory, each lesson, and each challenge reinforced what she had discovered in the quiet moments after being knocked out in that first gym. That true strength comes from discipline, intelligence, and perseverance. And yet remained humble. She never forgot the laughter, doubt, and underestimation that had once surrounded her. She carried those memories as motivation, not bitterness. Every young fighter she inspired, every challenge she faced, and every match she won was a testament to the journey she had endured, a journey that had begun with humiliation and had culminated in mastery. As stood once again in the ring, preparing for yet another tournament, she understood a truth that went beyond boxing. Life itself was a series of rounds, challenges, and opponents. Some would knock her down, some would underestimate her, and some would test her limits. But Carson had learned to rise, to adapt, and to fight with precision, intelligence, and heart. The storm had arrived in months ago, but it had grown beyond the town, beyond the gym, and beyond the ring. Carson was no longer just the new girl who had been knocked out. She was a champion, a strategist, and a symbol of resilience. And wherever her journey took her next, one thing was certain: the storm was unstoppable, and was its heart. As she walked out of the arena, sunlight spilling across her face, felt a quiet determination settle in her chest. The world beyond awaited, full of new challenges, stronger opponents, and unforeseen obstacles. But she was ready. Every knockdown, every lesson, and every triumph had prepared her for this moment. She had risen, she had mastered herself, and she would continue to rise no matter what came next. And in the quiet of her own heart, Carson smiled, gloves resting at her side, eyes focused on the horizon. She was no longer the girl who had been underestimated. She was a storm, a force, a fighter, unstoppable, unbreakable, and ready for whatever the world had in store.